What's up folks, how's it going? This is Waj. Hope you guys are all doing well, and this is the 4th generation 2020 version of the iPad Air. Looks awesome, very similar to the iPad Pro. It has that same kind of square design language, thin overall bezels, and no home button. Now the key issue that we're going to cover in this video is how does the Air compare against the iPad Pro? Is it better? Is it worse? What are the key advantages and disadvantages that both devices present? We're also going to be talking about the 8th generation 10.2-inch version of the iPad that got launched pretty much at the same time as the new Gen Air, so that way you have a good all-encompassing viewpoint of the entire iPad lineup for 2020. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, it takes a lot of resources to make content like this possible, so we definitely have to thank PDF Element by Wondershare for sponsoring this content. Now, in this digital world, signing PDF documents is becoming pretty much an absolute necessity, and if you're looking for an all-in-one smart PDF editor, PDF Element has a lot of great features. You can create, edit, convert, annotate, as well as sign PDF files in a manner that is quick, efficient, and secure. PDF Element is available on cross-platforms including Mac and PC. If you get the Pro version of the software, you can also take advantage of their advanced optical character recognition technology, which allows you to convert scanned documents or image-based files into selectable and searchable text that then you can convert into actual PDF files and do whatever you like with. In addition to features like advanced batch processing, PDF Element is an all-in-one solution for anybody needing to sign an online document or to custom create or modify an existing PDF file. You can try out the standard and Pro version of PDF Element for absolutely free, as well as with our limited time offer, you can get up to 50% off the license of the software if you click in the description down below. Big thanks to Wondershare for making this content possible. Now, coming back to the main topic at hand, you can see that the new generation iPad Pro as well as the Air use the new squared off design language with the thinner bezels, no home button, as well as USB-C integration. And next to the new generation iPads, the 8th generation definitely looks a little bit dated. You can see that we have thicker overall bezels as well as a larger overall footprint, and it's also the heaviest, weighing around 490 grams versus the Air. Wi-Fi is about 458 grams and 478 grams on the Pro respectively. Now the difference between the Pro and the Air at the front are pretty much negligible. You have a very similar screen configuration, 10.9 inches versus 11 inches on the Pro. It's really not until you flip the devices around and at the back you notice the camera difference. We actually have the same exact 12 megapixels standard wide camera. They both can shoot 4K resolution at 60 frames per second, but on the Pro we have the addition of the ultra wide 10 megapixel camera as well as the 3D LiDAR scanner, which is not available on the Air. Now the standard 10.2 inch iPad is also limited when it comes to camera configuration. On the rear we have an 8 megapixel stills capability, which is quite an old camera, as well as limited to only 1080p at 30 frames per second for video recording. Beyond that, in terms of the front-facing cameras, both the Air and the Pro are pretty much identical in terms of configuration. 7 megapixel stills with 1080p videos at 60 frames per second, and on the standard iPad 8th gen, we're looking at a potato camera pretty much, a 1.2 megapixel stills and 720p resolution at 30 frames per second. Now another huge benefit of the Air is the fact that it's fully compatible with the iPad Pro accessory lineup, including the smart keyboard with the trackpad, as well as the 2nd generation magnetically latching Apple Pencil. Now with the keyboard attachment itself, I think the iPad Air can pretty much replace 99% of the laptops out there, including ones that Apple make like the MacBook Air. Now, moving forward, let's talk about the displays on all three devices. Now all of them actually have a Retina display with a similar PPI count of 264, so the pixel density and overall sharpness across all three iPads is very, very similar, but there is a difference in terms of the actual display quality itself. The Pro and Air are using what they call a liquid Retina display. It's a laminated display panel which is mounted closer to the glass, so you do feel that the colors are a little bit more saturated, pop out a little bit more. It feels a little bit brighter, although in terms of actual maximum brightness, both the Air and the standard iPad are rated at 500 nits versus the Pro is rated at 600 nits, and certainly certainly the most important difference on the Pro is that we have 120 hertz refresh rate on the display versus 60 hertz on the other two. And that makes a huge difference when you're actually using the thing on a day-to-day basis, just navigating through the apps and interface. You can tell how fluid and dynamic the motion is compared to the 60 hertz display found on the Air and on the standard iPad. Beyond that, let's talk about the system in package configuration we have internally on all three iPads. Now, on the Pro, we have the fastest silicon that Apple makes for their iOS products, which is the Apple A12Z Bionic. 8-core CPU with 8-core graphics. The Air is using the same SiP found on the iPhone 12s, which is the A14, 6-core CPU with 4-core GPU, and the standard iPad is using the previous generation A12 Bionic, which also has a 6-core CPU and a 4-core GPU, but the core frequencies are slower than the new generation CPU, as well as the level of transistors on the A14 are quite astonishing, 11.8 billion versus 6.9 billion on the A12. Furthermore, in terms of storage and memory configuration, obviously the Pro will have the greatest variety. You can get up to 1 terabyte of long-term storage, as well as 6 gigabytes of RAM. And on the Air, we're looking at up to 256 gigabytes of long-term storage with 4 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigabytes with 3 gigabytes of RAM on the standard iPad. Now, in terms of the actual performance on all three devices, let's take a look at our Geekbench benchmark results. Taking a look at the single-core benchmark, you can see that, funny enough, the Pro and the standard iPad are pretty much the same at around 1,100 points. But when we get into the multi-core performance, the Pro is coming out on top of 4,700 points versus 4,200 points on the Air, and the standard iPad got 2,100 points. So we can certainly see in terms of the multi-core performance, the Pro is coming out on top. Now, if we factor in GPU, CPU performance, everything like that, Antutu is a great demonstrator of what all three of these iPads are really capable of. And we get around 750,000 points on the Pro versus 640,000 points on the Air. And the standard iPad got around 400,000 points on Antutu. Now, recently, 3D Mark released a new benchmarking platform for the iPad with their Wildlife Unlimited graphic test. And this is something that renders out in Quad HD resolution, 2560 by 1440. We're going to see which iPad renders out at the highest average FPS, and that is no surprise with the iPad Pro. Thanks to the 8-core graphics inside, we get an average rate of 80 FPS. The Air resulted in an average frame rate of 54 frames per second, and 38 frames per second was the rate of the standard iPad with the A12 Bionic. Now, on top of that, I also want to do a more real-world evaluation of the performance differences between the iPads. So we're going to do a little render output test, specifically with a 4K movie project on iMovie, with a decent amount of edit, transitions, color effects, as well as some sound added to it. Now, the total length of the iMovie project is around 2 minutes, and it only took about 1 minute 8 seconds to fully export out in 4K on the iPad Pro versus 1 minute 19 seconds on the Air and 1 minute 46 seconds on the standard iPad. So you can see that we have a logical progression in terms of the Pro being slightly faster than the Air, and the Air and the Pro being a decent amount faster than the standard iPad. And that's generally the consensus that I find when using all three of these devices based on my experience. The iPad Air and Pro are very similar in terms of performance, and they both outperform the standard generation iPad by a significant margin based on my user experience. But the difference between the Pro and the Air are negligible, and when you are using them, you're going to never really notice the difference between the two. It's really the cameras and the refresh rate that really sells me on the Pro. Now, last, let's talk about the battery parameters on all three devices. In terms of capacity itself, the Air and the Pro are very similar. Basically 28 watt-hour battery on both of them. And funny enough, the standard iPad has actually a slightly larger battery at 32 watt-hours. Now, we do always like to do a video playback test to just get a baseline feel of what the battery performance is going to be like, and it'll give you kind of a more realistic interpretation of what it might be like if you're going to go on a long journey in airplane mode and just watch a whole bunch of movies that you've downloaded through Netflix or whatever like that on your iPad. And in terms of the runtime itself, based on those parameters, all three devices go over 13 hours of video playback with a slight discrepancies. Basically on the Air, we get the slightly longer runtime of 13 hours 40 minutes versus 13 hours 39 minutes on the standard generation iPad and 13 hours 27 minutes on the iPad Pro. Now I have run this video playback test a couple of different times with a similar trend. Generally all three are very close to each other, and when you are using them on a day-to-day basis, you're guaranteed at least 10 to 12 hours of even heavy-duty usage. Now, in summary, coming back to the main topic at hand is which iPad is best and which one I would specifically pick. I definitely have to say that based on the feature set and the pricing aspect of things, which, by the way, for the Pro, Air, and standard iPad is $799, $599, and $329 respectively, I think the iPad Air is definitely a no-brainer. Thanks to the fact that the accessories work, you have the same overall display configuration minus the 120 Hz, which is the only real pro on the Pro side in my opinion. The Air has everything going for it. The internal processing is virtually pretty much the same for 99% of people out there, and I think save yourself the $200, get yourself the better accessories, and there you go. You have an awesome laptop replacement. And some people could argue that the cameras are not as widely varied, but really the camera that you're getting is the wide camera, which honestly isn't that important, and I could live without the 3D scanner that's also built into the Pro. But besides that, guys, that is my pick. Definitely love to hear what you guys think of the new generation Air. I think it's the best tablet on the market right now, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video. Make sure you have post notifications turned on, and make sure you've checked out PDF Element by Wondershare. Thanks to them for sponsoring the video. Click the link below for more details. Big thanks again for watching, and we'll see you real soon in the next one.